Welcome to the Adventure Travel Show podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Our episode today on solo travel tips, the pros, the cons, and how to stay safe while traveling solo first appeared on the Active Travel Adventures podcast, our companion podcast. But now that we've split into two podcasts, this more rightfully belongs here. So whether you're a first-time listener or this is a repeat for you, there's lots of great advice, so it's worth a second listen. So let's get started.
You have to just go, see what the world has for you, and then figure out what you look like in that new normal. In the place that I'm in, everything is unknown. And so these physical activities literally just help strengthen these courage muscles that I feel like I use all the time.
Today, we are going solo. That's right, even if you have a partner, I want you to listen to the program today because there are definite advantages and challenges to traveling solo. So even if you think there is no way I would ever travel solo, please listen to today's show with an open mind. You might just change your mind. Today, I'll be interviewing 3 solo travelers about the challenges and joys of traveling solo. Plus, since I usually travel solo myself, you'll hear my 2 cents worth as well. It's a great show, so even if you think, no way, I could never travel solo, I beg you, please listen today and see if you don't change your mind. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks, and my mission is to bring you epic but doable adventures from around the world. If you're like me, you don't want to live an ordinary life. You want to live a kick-ass life. And one way to do so is to add adventure travel to your life. I find adventure travel brings out the best in me. It challenges me, it encourages me, it enlightens me, and it inspires me to lead a bigger life. On this program, you'll learn about amazing adventures from around the world, plus get the tools and information you need so you can do these adventures with confidence. You'll come home feeling empowered and with amazing memories and stories that you can relive forever. And don't worry, the bar is such that my relatively fit 58-year-old body, particularly with some training, can do these adventures, and you can too. Today's episode is kind of a roundup episode. I've got 3 guests that I'll be interviewing separately about their experiences with solo travel. Our first guest is Jackie Nourse, who we met on our last episode. She is the host of Traveling Jackie and Budget-Minded Traveler and has been traveling solo for a long time, so has a ton of insights to share with us. When I interviewed her on the Quebec, I just asked her casually about solo, but we got so engrossed in it, I decided to take that section of our interview and add it to today's solo episode. Our other guests are Monica and Jason. I'll let them introduce themselves. Let's start with my interview with Jackie. Jackie, why do you travel solo?
I mean, the reason I do solo travel is because I'm solo. I don't let that stop me. For years and years and years, a lot of people struggle with the idea of getting out on their own, and it's just a necessity for me. It's just what I have to do. And so I do it. I never thought I would enjoy it, but I do love it now. I think you kind of have to get to a point where you're really comfortable with, and this is after I've already been traveling for, 12 or so years by the time that I went nomadic, really fully solo nomadic 3 years ago. And even after that much time of being comfortable traveling, it was weird to be on my own all the time. So for the cons, I mean, you are by yourself. All of those decisions are made only by you. All of the travel decisions, even where you're going to eat for, breakfast in the morning, or if you're going to get a beer this afternoon, everything is solely up to you. There's no one that you can confer with. That also happens to be one of the advantages of it. Sometimes it depends on which perspective, you have looking at it. And maybe it depends on the day. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes you just really wish there was someone there. Loneliness is a real thing. I have written about that before. And I think that most solo travelers will face real loneliness. It's a real thing. It's not just the point of being solo in a place. It's actually feeling alone. There's a big difference, and that can get to you if you're, if it's a while. I mean, I travel for months at a time. And so it can get really draining on me to be alone. But at the same time, this is where I am in my life. This is what I'm signing up for. And this is also my work. And this is what I'm choosing to do. And so it's just part of the territory, if you look at it that way. And the freedom that solo travel provides is unmatched in this world. I mean, there is a feeling that comes with being on your own in some far-flung corner of the planet, completely left to yourself and your own thoughts, what you want to do for the day. Everything is your will, and it is the most freeing feeling ever. It's incredible. And you can do whatever you want. So it's definitely, there are definitely pros and cons to solo travel, but I always encourage people to at least try it out, because you get to know yourself very quickly. Even if you think you know yourself, you don't, not until you solo travel. You can see what you're capable of, what your weaknesses are. It's incredible. It's an incredible, incredible tool for life, I think, is solo travel. I think everyone should do it at least once.
You had a quote in your Budget Minded Traveler episode number 63 that I loved. It was, lose yourself until you find yourself. Could you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was excellent.
It gave me chills just when you read it. Yeah. That came from a piece that I wrote on my Traveling Jackie blog that basically it was when I decided to leave everything behind and go out on my own to travel the world solo. I mean, for real, for the first time. This is 12 years after having traveled a whole bunch already and studying abroad and all that. But this was different because I had a relationship, I had a house, I had all these things, and I left everything. And it did feel I felt very lost at times, but it's because I had to recreate what my life looked like. That was my moment to decide what my new normal was going to be going forward. And I think I did lose part of myself there in a good way, though. It's like, you have to just go see what the world has for you and then figure out what you look like in that new normal. Like, figure out what the path forward is in this new reality that you've created. And that's at least how it applied to me. I think it depends on what your situation is and why you're choosing to solo travel and where you are in your life. So much about experience outwardly when you travel has to do what's going on inside. And so that was my experience at the time. I went out and just lost myself until I started to rebuild and find what that meant to start over, basically.
It's obvious that travel in general and solo travel in particular changed your life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm so grateful for that, because I feel so much more sure of who I am. I'm so much stronger now. I have so much more confidence. I mean, these are the things that come with just being on your own for so long in a place. It's not saying being on your own at home where you're comfortable with everything and the name of the store owner next down the street, whatever. It's not like that at all. Everything is different. Everything is new. Foreign languages, foreign currency, borders, flights, hotels, everything is a challenge. And so when you add that element to being completely on your own for a long time, maybe for the first time, it changes everything. And your personal growth is expedited more than anything, I think.
In the last few years since I lost my husband, I've been traveling solo. And the one question I get over and over again is about safety and the boogeyman at night and how do I deal with the safety issues? How do you respond to questions like that you get?
Are you not afraid about those things at home? I mean, bad things can happen anywhere. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter where you are. In fact, I think that the US these days could be a lot less safe than a lot of other places that I travel. And so I don't dwell on that stuff at all. I mean, I have a few things that some tricks up my sleeve just to make sure that I am safe and my belongings are safe. I mean, I pay attention. I always say that common sense is your best defense. I stand by that 110%. Don't leave your common sense behind when you walk out your door. But the world outside of your comfort zone is not a place to invite fear. It's not. It's a place to invite curiosity, go explore that. Find out what it really looks like, because it's just not about safety. Like it's not about fear and safety. It's about adventure and life and growth and people and connection and culture and food and language and activity and beauty. And it's that outweighs the fear. It's just not a thing. I mean, I've been traveling for 15 years and knock on wood, but nothing's ever happened to me. Like I've never been in a situation I couldn't handle. And maybe that's because, I carry my common sense close by. Maybe I've gotten lucky, maybe a lot of things, but I do speak a lot about safety because I know that people ask about it, and are concerned. But I would say you can't let that stop you from doing anything. I mean, otherwise you'd be stuck in your own house. And then what happened if there was an earthquake and your house fell down? Like you can't be safe anywhere in this world if you look at it that way. So just go do it, just get out there and go experience it. And, you'll find the confidence over the fear the more you go.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier about being more aware and things can happen to you even at home. I think actually you could be safer while you travel because you're more on red alert and you're more aware of your surroundings, whereas at home you're kind of lackadaisical.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know how they say that most accidents happen within a house, like car accidents?
Yeah, you got your guard down and you may be doing other things, whereas when you're traveling solo, you're paying attention.
Yeah, just an interesting metaphor.
It's the same thing with hiking. If I'm on a trail I don't know, I'm acutely aware of everything that's going on around me and my surroundings. But if I'm on a trail that I know very well at home, I'm not paying any attention whatsoever.
Yeah. I'm so glad you made that point. Such a good point.
Another question I get asked all the time is, how do you eat dinner alone?
Oh, it's so great. I'm so used to that by now. It's so funny.
A lot of the women I know are really uncomfortable eating dinner in a restaurant by themselves.
That is something you just have to put your big girl pants on and go do it, because what are you going to do? Not eat? No. What are you going to do? Hide in a corner with your takeout? No. Just go do it. Here's the thing. No one really cares. I have finally figured out after all these years that if someone is staring at me, which it does happen, I know why. It's because they're curious. They're curious about something, whether it's, why I'm wearing a backpack in this town, or why am I sitting by myself, or, wow, she's speaking French with an accent. I wonder where she's from. People are just curious. They're not out there look at that girl. She's by herself. Ha ha. It's not like that at all.
It's not like you're wearing a big L on your forehead.
Yeah. So, if you just get over the fact that, think about it with you. If you see someone solo walking down the street of your town with a big backpack on, aren't you curious? I wonder where they're going. What are they doing? Are they traveling? It's all curiosity. And so it's not negative. If you're worried about what people are thinking, that's the first part, is it's not negative. And B, if you can figure out how to make that place comfortable for yourself, for example, one of the things I love to do as I travel and as I'm at home is I love craft beer, and I love trying different beers all around the world. You could do this with wines or cheeses or whatever, anything that has to do with a restaurant. What's your thing? And so when I get to a new place or a bar or whatever, I love to sit down and get a new beer, and a beer makes me, it's home to me. I can do that anywhere in the world, and so I have my thing that I can kind of go to. That's my company. I work at breweries often. I will go to a brewery and get a beer. I call it a focus beer, #focus beer. I work that way. It's part of finding a comfort anywhere I can be in the world. Those things matter. And so I will make sure if I'm going out by myself, I will get a drink, something that makes me feel a little, maybe takes the edge off. I will get a beer and I will enjoy myself. I will people watch, whatever. You can choose to get out your phone and, have a conversation with someone across the world if you want to, or you can choose to put your phone down. You can bring a book. It doesn't matter. It's about you, it's not about what other people think. Just, it's funny because sometimes I'll pass by a restaurant that's super full. I'm I don't know if I want to go into that one all by myself, but if I pass by a place that's I can see that there is a table where I might feel comfortable. That's where I'll go in because I'm still introverted, so you got to take care of yourself. But that's ultimately what it's about, is taking care of yourself, making it comfortable for you and adventuring.
I find too, if I'm traveling solo, I'll have more opportunity to meet locals because they feel more comfortable coming up to you when you're traveling solo than if you're with other people.
Also, yeah, if you're putting out an energy that says, I'm approachable, then people will approach you for sure. And especially if you're in a place like for people who don't want to be alone, maybe you're only traveling solo because no one else wanted to go with you and you'd really rather have a buddy. I highly recommend staying in hostels, and it does not matter how old you are. There are always, you can find a hostel with a private room, which is what I like to do. But the beauty of that is you have an immediate community if you choose to have it. You can meet people in the communal areas. That's something that hotels do not offer. And so finding either like couch surfing or staying at a hostel or staying at an Airbnb where there's a host on site, and you can expose yourself to other people. If that's where you are in your travels, in your life, and you want to be around other people, then put yourself in those positions, because it's really easy to retract and do things on your own if you want to be solo. That's pretty easy. In fact, you'll probably still get approached just because people are curious, and there are other people who are solo who are going to sit down at the bar next to you and start talking about beer with you and then realize you're not Italian and be really curious about where that accent comes from. And yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and I love that hostel idea. I learned that for the first time about 2 years ago because it is lonely. But if you go to the hostel community rooms, you meet the people. And if you're not staying in a hostel, my week time of being alone is cocktail hour. That's when I want to talk to somebody. I don't care the rest of the whole day, dinner, no problem. But cocktail hour, I want to talk. Go find the bar next to the hostel because that's where they'll be. And they're traveling solo too, so they're looking for somebody to talk to as well. What advice would you give someone who's considering traveling solo for the first time?
Just go and don't be afraid. I don't think you're going to regret choosing to travel solo. You're going to learn something. That's time well spent. Getting out and seeing the world, any of these things, these are adventures. This is our one life. We get one shot, so go do it. I think you'll find that you're much more resourceful than you realize. You're going to be the one with a story to tell afterwards. So I encourage you to just try it. Test yourself. Get out there. Make it happen.
Next up, let's hear what Monica's got to say about solo travel. And after her, we'll get a guy's perspective. Can you start by introducing yourself and perhaps telling us your age?
Okay, so I'm Monica Arangurenshare, and I am 58 years old.
Wonderful. And how did you get into adventure travel?
So, well, quite honestly, I found myself single again, and that was back in around 2007, 2008, and started to do a lot of hiking on my own at that time. And when I got to my 50th birthday, I decided I wanted to do something bigger, and that's when I started to look into adventure travel and planned to go to New Zealand at that time.
So that was your first trip, was to do the New Zealand hike?
Yes.
Wonderful. And I take it you were going solo because you were recently single again?
Yes. So I didn't want to leave adventure behind.
Right. Well, that's great that you're so adventuresome. So how did you make the mind shift to say, okay, I'm going to go on my own? Because it's a scary concept for a lot of people to go on a trip all by themselves.
Indeed. And that's comments I've gotten also from friends when I've let them know what I'm doing. I've been kind of an independent gal all my life. And it's kind of like, let's just kind of push on through, so to speak. And so I was like, I'm not waiting for life to happen to me. I've got to do it. And so I'm going to go on these trips because I want to see these places. And that was kind of my motivation.
Now, did you do that on your own solo, or did you go with a tour company, or how did that work out?
The New Zealand trip, I did it. I went with a group. I went with Active Adventures there, and have been doing different trips of that nature since.
Regular listeners will recognize Active Adventures as one of my favorite companies and affiliates. In fact, I'm super excited that next month I will be going on the same trip that Monica went on. So Monica, how do you decide where you're going to go?
Gosh, sometimes it's like I see a photograph of like, oh, I want to go there. Or I might just get a vision in my mind of a place I've been thinking about. And then I start to investigate the location and how I might be able to get a taste of it.
Are you still traveling? Now that's been 10 years now since you were single. Are you still doing solo travel? Is that as your primary, or is that all you do, or do you mix it up with others, or how does that work?
So I've done some group-led trips, and I've also done some that are self-guided where I'm still with a company that's moving my belongings and setting up the itinerary and the maps and all of that. But I'm doing it on my own.
Now, I would imagine when you're in the group setting on the guided trips, that also gives you some more socialization, or can you talk a little bit about that?
It's like each experience is a little different. Yes, I'm meeting people from different places and learning about them, joking with them, creating songs with them, all kinds of things. So eating with them. So it's definitely a lot of social interaction with the group. When I'm on a self-guided hike, it's obviously a little quieter, but I tend to also favor that sometimes because I like to be in the quiet of nature. Sometimes I like to interact with the culture on a different level. So I enjoy that piece as well.
What are the pros and cons in your mind of solo travel?
The pros, I would say that solo travel lets you expand a little bit more in just your kind of getting out of the boxes, so to speak. Lets you meet new people that you might not otherwise when you're traveling with a companion maybe that you've known for a while, a friend, family member, whoever that might be. Cons? I don't think there are any. I mean, I will say I choose a single room so that I don't get any snoring. That sort of thing, so I can sleep on my own. So for me, that's important. That would be the only con for me if I can't sleep. And so that's why I tend to choose a single room. Otherwise, other than something like that, I can't think of any, quite honestly.
Since I lost my husband and now that I'm traveling solo, the thing I'm always getting is, aren't you scared? Aren't you afraid of the big bad wolf and getting raped or mugged or whatnot? Can you talk a little bit about the safety issues?
I have never felt not at ease. I've always felt safe on these trips. With a group, certainly you're surrounded by your group all the time because you're doing all the activities with that group. The only time you're separate is maybe if you have a specific day that you have in a particular town on your own. And so you might visit that, but never any concerns of safety in that sense. And then when I've been on self-guided tours, I always have, in the case of the company that I worked with, I had a GPS, I had instructions, I had a phone of a contact I could call 24 hours a day if there was an issue. I always had someone always checked in with me. So I felt like I was supported in both styles of travel.
How about loneliness? Is that ever an issue?
Loneliness I would say more during the self-guided hikes, because I might see something and not have anyone to talk about it, so to speak. But other than that, not really. And when I'm with a group hike, I'm with other people. And so I've always got companionship with me.
And another thing I always get is, how do you eat by yourself?
Oh, yes, indeed. I've been asked that as well. For me, I carry a book with me and just go with it that way. I'm usually, I think I've just gotten used to it. I'm not very self-conscious about it and enjoy interacting with the waiters and the waitresses and the hosts and, wherever I'm eating, and enjoy myself that way.
There's also more attention and curiosity when you're traveling solo, and you get a lot more local interaction, which I enjoy very much and think of as a plus.
That is true. That is true. Especially if you're at like a little small restaurant, the host or the owner might chat with you more, which is great. And I was actually on a trip earlier this year where an older gentleman, I was just walking around and I had my camera going, and he came up to talk to me in Italian. I was in Italy earlier this year, and talking to me about, how he had owned a camera like that. And we had a nice little chat, and then I was back on my way. And so that was, kind of fun to be able to chat with him for a while.
Monica, right now, somebody is sitting on their couch saying to themselves, I'm just like Monica. If I don't get off this couch, I'm never going to see the places that I want to see. What advice would you give them so they get the courage and the confidence to go try this on their own?
I would say, don't wait. This is, you're attracted to doing this trip. Do it. It'll open up a whole another level of possibilities and experience and independence. Do it and enjoy yourself, and don't wait. Don't wait for another opportunity.
Monica, have you found that solo travel is important to you, that it's somehow changing who you are?
I think it helped. I love the companionship, but also it's helping me. I think it's just, I think it definitely supports my being independent, doing my life, living my life the way I want it, and taking advantage of the opportunities, especially outdoor, and hiking opportunities while I can do it. So I think that's how it positively helps me out.
It empowers me. When I get back from one of these trips, I'm like, I did that.
Exactly.
And if I can do that, then I can do this, whatever my current real world problem is.
Exactly. It's self-empowering. And if, maybe a particular trip's going to be a little more challenging, that I've got to rise to the occasion to work out and get ready. And it feels great when I'm out there and accomplishing it. So definitely it's an empowering experience, and one that supports a good sense of independence and just moving forward the way you want.
And have you kept up with any of the people that you've met on your trips?
I have. I did a trip in the Mont Blanc area of France, Italy, and Switzerland a couple of years ago, back in 2016. And there were 4 singles on that trip, actually. And the 4 of us have had a couple of reunions now. Our last one was just a few weeks ago in Toronto. And so we always go on a little hike and then eat out and see wherever we're visiting together. And it's just a lovely experience. And this time we were also able to hook up with a couple that were from the Toronto area that had been on the same trek, and got to have a lovely dinner with them. So it was really a great time together.
Yeah, nice. No, I found usually each trip, there's 1 or 2 people I'll meet that we end up becoming friends, even if it's just Facebook friends that we keep up that way. And in fact, in 3 weeks, when I go to the UK, I will be staying with a gentleman and his girlfriend that I met on the West Highland Way last year for a couple of days before I started a long distance trek on the Cotswold Way.
Oh, beautiful. That's going to be fun. I
know. I'm excited. I'm excited about that. So can you tell us some of your favorite stories about some of your treks?
Favorite stories.
Well, you've gone through, I know you went to New Zealand. When you look back on New Zealand, what's the story you tell?
Well, I guess for me, it was deciding to do the bungee jump. There were only 2 of us that had the courage in the group to do that. And I'm so glad that I did that. And the rest of the group cheered us on. So I had a blast doing that. It was a little scary. And I will say I was a little nervous once I got on the plank that I was supposed to drop off from. But it was so freeing and so much fun to be hanging down on this large rubber band. So I'm just happy I had that experience, especially celebrating my 50th birthday then.
That's right. So that was your 50th birthday trip. And then you've also gone to the Galapagos. What's your favorite story about the Galapagos?
What struck me there is just there's so many amazing animals, penguins and sea lions and fish and iguanas. I mean, it's so fascinating to be surrounded by these wonderful creatures that are really not timid at all with humans. So that was wonderful. And I remember in particular going snorkeling and seeing manta rays, but these giant ones underneath, floating and swimming below me. It was just amazing to see their size and their beauty. They were golden and had some black spots on them, and they were just, moving on their leisurely pace. It was just fantastic.
Very cool. Yeah, and we did cover the Galapagos episode. I'll put links to that in the show notes. And then we also covered Mont Blanc, which you've done too. What's your favorite story there?
Oh, gosh. Well, this is kind of a social story, actually. All the hiking was fantastic. I in particular, because we were above tree line a lot of the time. So that was just beautiful to see these huge snow-covered mountains just in your face, and you're looking at them. It was a splendor for me. But the social story is that the group I was with, a few of us somehow got into doing these rapping while we were hiking and coming up with these silly tunes, and that kind of made me start to create this particular rap tune based on all the food that we were eating. And so I presented that at the end of our tour at our last dinner, and one of my colleagues in the group backed me up, like making all the funky little rap sounds. And so we put it together, and it was a hoot. So we had a great time doing that.
Did anyone happen to record that?
Yes, they did.
Would you be willing to share that with me?
I could.
I think we should. I'll end this episode with that.
It's about cheese and pastry, and it's all in, I will say, it's all in French. So hopefully anyone who recognizes the food will get a hoot out of it.
That sounds like fun. That's a great story. And then now you've got another fun place you're going to, which also has been covered on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm going in about 2 weeks. I leave to do a trip in the Dolomite Mountains in Italy, north of Venice. And I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to be back with a group because I've done some more self-guided hiking the last couple of years. So I'm going to be with a group again, which I look forward to. And I'm looking forward to the scenery and the exercise because that's what we love with hiking is the workout, I think, too. So it's going to be good.
Yeah, Annie, who I interviewed on the Dolomite episode, has traveled all over the world. I mean, she's done everything. And she said that was the perfect trip.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, she said it was the best mix of exertion, like the hiking, the scenery, the people, the food. So she said it was a perfect trip.
Awesome. Well, I'll carry that with me for sure.
Any other thoughts on solo travel or adventure travel you'd like to share?
Just, seize the day. There's so much to see out there and so much to do. Just get out there and do it.
Now, guys, as you listen to my interviews, have you paid attention to the joy and the thrill that you hear in their voices? There's just nothing like going on an adventure. And finally, for our last interview today on solo travel, we're going to get the guy's perspective. Can you start by introducing yourself, please?
My name is Jason Waitkins, and I am 37.
And how did you first get into adventure travel?
My first trip was in 2003. I really wanted to visit New Zealand. I don't know why specifically. I was reading about it growing up, and it sounded like a really cool, awesome place. And then Lord of the Rings came out, and that propelled me even more. I'm like, I have to go here. And then in 2003, I actually went, and I wanted to go there. I didn't want to go there just to sightsee. I wanted to hike. I wanted to do that kind of thing. So that's kind of what drove me into that being my first trip.
So you were already pretty active before you got into adventure travel?
Yes, I hiked. I actually grew up. My parents' house is actually right next to a section of the Appalachian Trail. So I grew up knowing, that's the longest marked trail in the United States, and all that. And I hiked the sections of it nearby, and I then branched out from there. And yeah, there's actually some pretty interesting trails not far from where I live.
And where's that?
New York. I'm in what's called the Hudson Valley region. I grew up in Garrison, which is the town just south of Cold Spring. And Cold Spring has become kind of a hiker's town because there's a few challenging trails near there. And it's easily accessible from New York City. So there's actually, on the weekends, there's a lot of hikers come up on the trains because you can easily get off at the Cold Spring station and travel around. And you don't need a car. You can just work your way back to the station.
And our topic today is solo travel. Is that something you've always done, or is this something new for you?
No, I pretty much always did solo initially because I actually was under the impression I was the only, growing up, it was a small town. I was one of the few who liked adventure travel. So it was only me. And then I enjoyed it a lot. And I always join a group usually. Usually if it's a tour, there's a group I usually end up joining, and they're either if they're not solo, then they're with either with a friend or a spouse or whatever, and we're all there for the same thing. So it's actually kind of a good way to meet new people.
And Jason, what would you consider the pros and the cons of solo travel?
For me, my best thing is I can pretty much go when I want. I can center around like my schedule. There's no coordination. If there's two, three or more people traveling, it's going to be harder to get time off from work, for example. But for me, when it comes to, I prefer solo traveling for the most part, just because I really it's easy to coordinate with myself. I just look at the dates. Okay, here, this trek is going here, and I can go here at this point, and I have a certain amount of time off I can take. If I'm traveling with someone, I did one adventure trek with my father not too long ago. And, we do have to, there's a little more work involved just to make sure, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. We both have time off. We can both get there, without issue. We're both fit enough to take, we both know what we're getting into and all that. So, I guess there's pros and cons of each, but for me, I just, I have a set place I'd like to go, a set number of countries or treks I want to do and want to visit. And to me, it's just kind of easier. Like if I don't know anyone else who wants to do it with me, I just go ahead and do it.
You make an excellent point, because not only do you have to coordinate the time schedules, but also that the physical difficulty rating is consistent for both parties or all parties.
At the time, my father, he actually has some knee problems at the moment, but at the time, he was okay. And it was actually a not too challenging trip, at least graded. You have to we always look at the gradings of the trip with kind of a grain of salt. You obviously have to know what you can and can't do. And it's better to read the descriptions rather than just, reading by the little number they give. Like this one company we were with, they just gave they assigned a number 1 through 6, I think, 6 being the hardest. And this one was graded, I think, a 2. But afterwards, I say this was kind of more of like a 3. And it was because we were in Scotland and there was a few sections where there was no trail. It was pretty much bushwhacking, and it was really muddy. So walking through that section was actually quite difficult, more so than it was. And even our leader said that. So yeah, you have to really be careful, make sure everyone can do it, make sure you know what you're getting into.
Female solo travelers obviously have a few different concerns than males, but can you talk about safety as a solo traveler from the male perspective?
I personally have never been worried about my safety, but it is always a consideration. So I always, my first big travel was with New Zealand, which is generally a country that's more on the safe side. My next travel was in Peru, which is a developing country. So I actually read up quite a bit on it. What vaccines do I need to get? What is the crime rate? And I did that, and I was actually I always read up on the countries I'm visiting, although you also have to kind of take those with a bit of a grain of salt. A website I usually go to, at least at first, to check out the country I'm visiting is the U.S. State Department website, because it gives descriptions on visa requirements and any vaccines that are recommended. I always try to look that up, that kind of thing. But it also says what the crime is. However, it is kind of over-exaggerated, to a degree. You always read about the bad things. And I also look at what they say the crime is. It is, however, tends to be over-exaggerated sometimes, because you'll read about the bad things, right? You'll always say, okay, there's very high crime, there's police corruption, or there's this or there's that. But you just got to be aware of your surroundings is what I always do. Growing up, because I live close to New York City, but not in it, just going to New York City, I was always told, okay, look, put everything in, your front pocket, not your back pocket, keep, watch out for muggers, watch out, for this, for that, anyone who tries to bump into you, that kind of thing. So I try to you just got to be diligent and to, do that. And yeah, as a solo traveler, my first time where I was actually there ahead of when the official tour I was joining started was actually Peru in Cusco. And yeah, I wanted to go there. I was worried about acclimatizing to the altitude. And so I got there a day ahead of the main tour and walked around, and I was feeling kind of winded, at least at first. I ended up adjusting perfectly fine. But yeah, I was actually, looking in all directions and making sure there was a lot of people. No one ever actually came up, and I never felt unsafe, but I was being extra careful. A thing I do a lot recently is a lot of the pants I wear, like just kind of for like general walking around, they actually have zippers on them. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but my biggest concern is my passport or my wallet getting stolen.
Let's talk a little bit about what you feel when you're doing an adventure, whether it's hiking or paddling or cycling, and you do it solo, and there's the possibility that you get hurt and there's nobody around to help you. Do you have any concerns about that, or is that one reason that you do group travel?
Absolutely. And I actually experienced that personally. A couple of years ago, I was hiking in Acadia National Park in Maine, and I ended up slipping and falling and not able to stand. So I was traveling solo at that point, and I basically had to take out my cell phone and I dialed 911. And now there was a few trekkers who walked by, and this was just a day hike. It wasn't like I wasn't backpacking or anything like that, but still it was very rugged terrain, and a couple of hikers nearby actually stopped and said, okay, we'll wait until people come and get you. And yeah, they had to carry me off, and that was a humbling experience. I kept thinking, well, I'm not gonna fall, or this isn't gonna happen. I'm still within civilization, I'm not in another country, but I can only imagine what would have happened. Yeah, if I was on the Inca Trail, where you have to hike for 3 days, what would have happened if that would have happened? But yeah, having a group and having a leader there who at least they always have a radio or a cell phone or whatever to contact whoever, that is actually quite comforting, and more so now than it was, say, 10 years ago.
Right. And I want to add two things for the listeners on this about what you talked about. I recently did an episode on safety on adventure travel, so I'll put a link to that in the show notes and on the webpage. And also another interesting story is the episode part 2 of the Kilimanjaro series, where our guest had to go down the mountain on a stretcher. So it's a very interesting episode in that regard. So anyway, so let's move on from the scary things, and let's talk about, how do you choose where you want to go next?
I would say when I first started this back in the early 2000s, I had a bucket list. I just said, I want to visit New Zealand. I want to hike the Inca Trail. I'm trying to think what the other one was, but the main two were, I want to visit New Zealand, I want to hike there, and I want to hike the Inca Trail. I was reading about how beautiful the trail is, how it's a great payoff ending up in Machu Picchu, which is also, just beautiful. But after that, I wanted to I just started making a list of countries and places I wanted to visit, and then kind of looking at, well, I want to visit here. I want to do this. Where is this located? So one of them, I think my biggest goal after doing the Inca Trail was Kilimanjaro. So I said, okay, where's that? Oh, okay, that's in Tanzania. Where's that? That's Africa. I just kind of went from there. Okay, what else is there? And choosing that trip, there's a lot of tour companies that do Kilimanjaro. And the one I ended up picking with was one that was doing a specific route up the mountain. It had extra days. It was more expensive, of course, unfortunately, but it had extra days while climbing, and it did a specific way. It did the Western Breach, if you're for anyone who's aware of that, which was, I think most companies do the other way. I forget what it's called, but this one, we did the Western Reach. We actually stayed in the Crater Camp, which is also kind of rare for that, but I figured that was good for getting used to the altitude. And that's why I ended up going with that tour company. But beyond that, there's just a list of countries I'd like to visit. And the main ones were, again, Kilimanjaro, Galapagos was one. And the next one that I haven't done yet is actually the Alps, which is on my bucket list. But basically, I just said, okay, where can I hike that I haven't hiked before? And I just started I looked at the companies I've gone with before, and a few other notable ones, and look at what they offer and see if it's financially feasible, if it's time-wise it's feasible, and I pretty much go from there. But I would love to, I mean, I have a semi-life goal of, if you want to call it that, to visit every country in the world. I don't think I'm going to get there, but I definitely want to visit and hike everywhere I can. So I just go with the ones I want to most. And I've done quite a few of them, but there's still quite a few left.
Very cool. Have you found that travel, particularly solo travel, have you found that it's changed you in any way?
Initially, I don't know if I felt different. I mean, I enjoy it. Like, it's like that's my vacation. That's kind of how I get away from it all. My first few trips, I wouldn't even take my cell phone with me. I'd leave it at home. And, that was my disconnection from the everyday hustle and bustle. But as far as changing me, I mean, it helps me. I don't know. It's kind of I don't know if I have an answer for you. It's definitely helped me grow a certain way, like kind of enjoying, because I actually live alone. I'm single and pretty much live alone. So to me, it's a great way to meet new people and to try, because even if you're not with a group, you're always going to meet someone on the trail, most likely. So to me, that's the way I kind of interact with people, is like, is my fellow hikers. So, I mean, I don't know if it changed me in in any way other than that, and just that it's something that drives me to continue going. Like, I have places to visit. I want to keep going.
Have you kept up with any of the people you've met on the trails?
A few, not too many. There's a few, like with Kilimanjaro, because that was a small group, and we were all, and that was obviously a long trek. It was a long trip. The whole trip was 18 days, but the trek up the mountain, I think, was 9 days total. So we got to know each other really well. We still communicate through email every once in a while, usually around the anniversary, which is late January. We usually send an email saying, hey, it's been 5 years, it's been 6 years, how's everybody doing? And there's two people who actually I do send a Christmas card to, because they send one to me each year, and we just kind of write down what treks we've done or what we're planning on doing. They'll send me one, I think it was 2 years ago. They said, oh, we finally did the Inca Trail, that you talked about. And it was just as you described. It was great. And I always write down what I did. Hey, I did Galapagos this year. I did Nepal this year, and all that.
A lot of people, when they find out that I'm going to be traveling solo, say, aren't you scared, or don't you get lonely? What advice would you give somebody that's on the fence and trying to decide whether or not they should try a solo trip?
Definitely try to join a group of some kind, an adventure trekking tour where you'll be joined with other people, preferably a smaller group, between I would say a nice number is between 8 and 12, 14 people is probably ideal, because then it's not too big, it's not too small. But just do that. Try to look up an organized tour of an area where you want to visit, whether it's Machu Picchu or somewhere in Europe, wherever. See if you can find a tour company that has a group that you can just join, because then because everyone, the way I see it, everyone is there to do what you're doing. We're here to hike this trail. We're here to visit this landmark, or whatever it is. That's going to be a thing you have in common. Every trip I've been to, I'm actually nervous when I step off the airplane, because I'm worried, okay, is this, especially if it's a country where English isn't the first language. So I'm always worried about, okay, I made it through passport control. I just handed them my passport, they stamped, and I went through. Now I'm like, okay, where's the meetup point? I'm always kind of worried that I'm going to miss, the meetup, but it's never been a problem. Usually they always say, okay, the leader's going to either hold a sign or they're going to be wearing a branded shirt of some kind. I just came back from Ireland, and we had to meet in Belfast in a small kind of out of the way bus station. And I was like, okay, wait, so there's a bus station and a train station, and they're both connected by a hallway. And so I was walking back and forth a couple times through it, because the leader was actually late by 5-10 minutes. So I was worried, wait, am I missing this tour? What's going on? And then I ended up seeing, there she was. Then she ended up walking through, and she was actually, she was just trying to find parking, because parking was limited in that station. And then we all everyone nearby just kind of walked up and said, oh, hey, yeah, I'm part of this group. So yeah, I get nervous for just like the meetup, but like once the meetup is done, we all say hello and we're all like, yeah, let's go, let's do this. By the end of the trip, we're all like saying our goodbyes and saying it was a pleasure to meet you and this was fun and everything. So yeah, if you're worried about traveling solo, it's good for, to sum it up, it's good for one, you're going to be with other people who are like-minded, possibly other solo travelers. And two, you don't have to worry too much about the organization. Everything's planned out for you. You just got to get to the location.
You make a good point, Jason. When you use a tour company, they literally pretty much take you by the hand, so you don't have to worry about the logistics of getting to the different places, which can be quite complicated, particularly if you're traveling solo and you can't juggle cars or whatnot. So it just makes it a lot easier for you. Plus, basically, you're solo, but with company.
Yes, correct. And in certain countries, that like I'm about to take an Italy trip, and I was going to take a few days ahead of the tour to visit some of the cities. And yeah, I actually sat and planned, and that was kind of fun, I guess, now, because I'm like, okay, yeah, I can quickly just look up, oh yeah, I can take the train from Rome to Venice. Oh, that sounds good. What hotels are nearby and whatever. And then like I'll just join. But yeah, it's actually, my whole thing planning this, I'm like, okay, I just got to get to where I meet the tour in Venice. Right. Then after that, I'm like, okay, all I got to care about is, okay, my flight home is the day they drop us off. Like, boom, that's it. Like, done. I don't have to plan anymore.
If you're new to the program, I do a travel planner for each of the destinations that we cover on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. You can download these for free by going to the page for each corresponding destination, or go to the directory page and click on the destination and get it from there. Or if you sign up for my monthly, note that's just monthly, and I do not sell your emails or anything, newsletter, you will get them automatically for free. So it's my way to help you plan your adventures with confidence, and it'll have weather information, safety information, recommended tour companies, and suggested itineraries, and everything on a handy, usually a 2-page printer-friendly with active links, so that you have in one piece of paper everything you need to know and do to plan your adventure. How about we finish up with you sharing some of your favorite stories from your trips? When I name off some of the adventures I know you've taken, can you tell us your favorite go-to story when you think about that destination? Let's start with Annapurna, which is one of my most popular recent episodes. And for those unfamiliar with Annapurna, it's in Nepal.
My favorite was just seeing, I just wanted to see like the Himalayas, and I didn't want to do Everest because I'd already done Kilimanjaro. So I was like, climbing so high to just see altitude for the sake of saying I climbed it. It's not on my bucket list anymore. So Annapurna that whole circuit was very beautiful. You see a lot of mountains, just one after the other, each one really beautiful. And the highlight was actually completing it, getting to Annapurna Base Camp. I forget the altitude offhand, but that was actually a trek, and we had pretty good weather. And we actually got up early one night and saw the sunrise over, and I got some great photos of the sunrise over the Himalayas. And I would say that was probably the best, because it was also maybe not part of the hiking part, but it was actually interesting just being in the city of, I can never pronounce this correctly, Kathmandu. The capital city. It was quite interesting that it was kind of organized chaos on the roads. Like the section where we go the Thamel area, I think it's called, where there's a lot of trekkers. The roads are very narrow. Everyone's just kind of walking around. It was quite kind of a culture experience to see how people just kind of every day just kind of get up and go and do this. But from a hiking standpoint, every day was like more beautiful views than the next.
And what about your first adventure trip to New Zealand?
All right, so New Zealand. So I would say my favorite location, I really enjoyed the area where we went to the Milford Sound. It was very beautiful. It rained that morning, and then it stopped, and our guide had told us this is actually perfect because when it rains, there'll be a lot more waterfalls that you'll see, because a lot of them are just kind of trickle or whatever while it's sunny out, but while it's raining and just after the rain, you'll see a lot. So that was actually really beautiful walking around that area. And I also enjoyed, I'm trying to think of the name, Mount Aspiring National Park. That one, we actually walked in and we camped in a hut for a night. And then and then it snowed that night. And so on the way back, it was actually snow covered. Not a lot. It was like maybe an inch or two, but it was actually really cool to have pictures going one way where it's all, green grass and clear. Coming back, everything was snow covered. It was beautiful.
And how about your Galapagos adventure? And did you do just the Galapagos, or did you also do mainland Ecuador?
I did both, and the mainland. I actually enjoyed the mainland. In terms of hiking, I enjoyed the mainland better, without a doubt. I can't remember the town we were in, but it was town down in the jungle, and we did what was called reverse canyoning, which is basically climbing up waterfalls. It's not as these waterfalls aren't like the raging waterfall. They're not Niagara Falls type waterfalls. But it was a very awesome and challenging, but not too challenging hike through the rainforest. They told us ahead of time, look, you're going to get wet. If your camera isn't waterproof, don't bring it. And it was nice. I think it was like a 3-hour hike to where we were going, and then through rivers and up the waterfalls and whatever. And then it was like an hour to just kind of off the trail that was dry to get back to where we were. For Galapagos itself, honestly, the best thing was snorkeling in Kicker Rock, it's called. I believe, we came up close with hammerhead sharks, and they said, you don't need to worry. And there was quite a few times where I was like, are you sure we don't need to worry? But just swimming and seeing, I saw at least 3 types of sharks. The Galapagos, there's actually a Galapagos shark, and I think it was the reef white tip was the other one. But we actually saw quite a lot of, there was just tons of wildlife just in this little area snorkeling. And, the spotted eagle rays were really beautiful is another thing. And the sea turtles were also, I can't say enough how awesome the sea turtles looked. So, and the sea turtles were really awesome. Every one I saw was beautiful, whether it just was sitting still in the areas where we saw them resting or whether they're actually swimming. So, yeah, for Galapagos, hands down, it was the snorkeling. We did hike a couple of spots, but these hikes were nothing compared to the mainland.
You've done some really killer trips, Jason. How about Patagonia?
So the biggest accomplishment with Patagonia was definitely the W Trek. That was actually really difficult. I would say it was the second hardest trek I've been on, because the way we did it was the first day we go up Torres del Paine, I believe it's pronounced the Towers of Blue. And that was, I think it was 20 kilometers total round trip, I think. And it was by the end of that, and that was the first day. By the end of the day, I was everything was just hurting. And I'm like, we got 4 more days of this. What did I sign up for? But after that, the next day was actually only I think 11 kilometers, and it was mostly flat. And that was actually a joke there. They always would say mostly flat. It was never properly flat. It was always ups and downs all over the place. So just the whole completing the W Trek, but I still, after the second day, I'm like, okay, this wasn't too bad. I'm going to do that. I've never backed down from a hike before. I'm doing this. And the way it ended, I forget the name of the glacier, of course. I think it was Gray Glacier, but the very last day was actually beautiful viewpoints over a huge glacier. That was definitely the biggest accomplishment and best hike of the Patagonia trip.
So where's your next adventure?
So next, I'm actually going to be going to Italy and hiking the Dolomites, and it's my first trekking in mainland Europe. I've trekked in Ireland and I've trekked in Scotland, but I've never trekked in mainland Europe, and it's been on my bucket list, and I'm doing it.
I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. Annie, who we interviewed on the Dolomites, who has traveled the world and done just amazing adventures all over the world, said that was the perfect trip. It was the perfect mix of culture, food, hiking, people, everything. And she said it was just marvelous.
I'm looking forward to it, yes, for that reason.
Any final thoughts for our listeners?
The only thought I can think of is don't, if you're worried about solo traveling, just do it. Just do what we talked about before, and go with a tour company. You don't have to go. You don't have to organize it completely on yourself. That actually does sound like a daunting task, even for me now. But yeah, just do it. You won't regret it.
I agree, Jason, because you can plan regular travel on your own, but trying to plan the logistics for adventure travel is super difficult. So I always recommend using a small group tour company.
Yes, seeing some of the trips I've been on, there's no way I would have been able to do some of these things or been able to organize it. And yeah, there's a lot of logistics going on there with fees and permits and all that.
Not only is planning an adventure trip logistically difficult, oftentimes, particularly in foreign countries, but it can also save you money by using a small group tour company, because You don't have to rent all the different vehicles and hire the different guides in the different places. It's all kind of planned for you, and you have the benefit of having other people help share that expense. It's been great having Jackie, Jason, and Monica on the program today to help share their insights in solo travel. Now, I'd like to share with you some of the rules that I've made for myself now that I'm doing solo travel. These are in no particular order, and again, many don't apply if you're with a small group tour because all this is taken care of for you. But if I'm truly traveling solo, here are some of my rules. Number 1, I want to know where I'm staying that night by noon. I don't mind winging it and figuring out my itinerary and such when I get to a place, but I want to know where I'm going to rest my head. And so I'll make sure I book something at least by noon of the day that I'm going to be staying somewhere. And then 2, I make sure I arrive before dark just in case I get lost or run into some other complication. I always keep my eyes on my food and drink, making sure they don't leave my sight. I don't go to the restroom and leave my drink on the table, so I don't have to worry about somebody slipping a drug into it. I'm careful of overly friendly locals, particularly if they have no reason to be overly helpful. You might find somebody on a bus or a train that, oh, let's share a cab, or they're all of a sudden your best friend. Often that could be a setup for a con that it's their partner in crime that you're quote-unquote sharing the cab with. So be a little bit cautious of that. Get your hotel to call you a taxi or take the rideshare programs like Uber or Lyft and use somebody that's got multiple stars. When you get to an area, ask the locals about the area. In fact, show them a paper map and have them circle areas that you should avoid. When traveling, always be aware and keep mindful of your situation. Be aware of who's around you, and if the hairs rise in the back of your neck, your subconscious has seen something that you may not even be aware of, and take action. And don't be afraid to make noise, telling somebody to back off or make a scene. I know we're raised to be polite, but that's not the time to be polite. It's the time for you to make a commotion. And when you're in an area, particularly if you don't know, always have an exit plan. See, how do you get out of the situation should something arise? Make sure somebody knows where you're going to be and what time you should be there and at what time they should raise the red alert. And if you're traveling internationally and don't want to use up your data, still periodically turn on your phone so that your phone registers the GPS of your last known location. And if you're not sure if even solo travel is for you, try doing what I always call doing the +1. Wherever you are in your comfort zone, just push it just a little bit. So that way you stretch your boundaries, build up your courage, build up your self-confidence, and get the benefits that I keep talking about by doing this kind of travel. You're not going to regret it. So if you've never taken a trip by yourself, why don't you just try going for a weekend? Doesn't even have to be some big exotic place. Just go someplace by yourself for a weekend and see what it's like. And then maybe after that, you'll have the courage to try a week. And then perhaps after that, you might try going on some kind of an international trip. Each time you do it, just push yourself just that little bit more outside of your comfort zone. And in all the times I've traveled, all the places I've gone, I truly have never really had an incident that I can even relate to you of a problem. And you saw that same, or you heard the same thing from our guest today, that particularly Jackie, who has been everywhere, has never had an incident, and she's been doing this for 12, 15 years, I believe she said. Also, we talked about a whole bunch of destinations on today's program. I'll put links to that in all the show notes, which you can find by scrolling down if you're listening to this on your phone or by going to activetraveladventures.com. You can go to the directory page and click on any of the different destinations and see all the really cool places we've covered on this program. Finally, I'd like to ask you, as I'm planning the adventures that we're going to be doing in the next year, can you reach out to me? I don't care if it's email at kit@activetraveladventures.com, via Facebook, via our Facebook group, Twitter, I'm Kit_Parks, Instagram, Kit.Parks, and let me know, where do you want to go next year so I can put together the programs that you need to plan your next big adventure. I know you're hearing my music in the background, but hold on, don't forget, at the end of my adventure on, you're going to hear Monica's rap song to conclude this episode, so stay tuned. I will be back in 2 weeks with another great adventure. Until then, this is Kit Parks, Adventure On. Here's a snippet of Monica's rap song.